Good afternoon, and welcome to K2's Road to Excellence with PowerPoint Part 1 and our partners Adagio. This is Alan Salmon, and I'm pleased that you're with me today for my first webinar in 2019. A little bit of admin before we start. Marilyn Benninger is backing me up today, and she is your go-to person for technical issues and questions. You ask questions in the chat window, and within 10 days of today, you will get the recording, my PowerPoint slides, and all the answers to the questions. Plus, of course, your CPD certificate. For those of you that are new, 5 times today, Marilyn is going to stop Andrew and myself and put up a polling question. That's a multiple choice question. You don't have to get the answers right, but you do have to select one so you're recorded as answering it. If we find that you've answered 75% of the questions, you will get a CPD certificate for 1 verifiable hour. If you don't, it'll be 1 non-verifiable. Today's interesting. The topic is PowerPoint, but after PowerPoint goes presentation tips. So in my time this afternoon, I'm only going to spend about 2 or 3 minutes on dealing with PowerPoint slides. I'm going to deal with my 25 years of experience in presenting them. So Marilyn, it's time for the first poll.
Good afternoon or good morning all. Thanks for joining us today. Your screen will be changing to blue as I launch the poll. It's a fairly easy question. In your PowerPoint experience, have you ever presented to an audience larger than 100, used images on a slide, embedded a financial statement or chart, used a lot of slides with bullets, or none of the above? You can select all that apply. We appreciate your participation in our webinar, and we usually wait until 85 to 90% participation on the poll just to make sure everyone has their time. And we're right there now. So I'll be counting you down from 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I'm closing the poll. I'm going to share the results with you now, Alan.
Interesting. All right. Give me back my screen, please. And there we go. So how do I start? Well, I start with the answers to 2 questions, and they're shown on this slide. First, what's the purpose of the presentation? Am I training on Excel? Am I doing a session like Ward Blatch did 2 weeks ago, where he's basically educating and not using the computer except for the PowerPoint? Is it a sales presentation? Is it an information such as, let's review the financial statements? Next, who's the audience? Is it 5,000 people like I presented to the Lions International Conference in Birmingham, England in 1999? But typically, I suspect for most of you, except for the 11%, it's a small audience. So with that in mind, then we go to here. And I break presentations down, as I started in the previous slide, to training and to messaging. So training needs no explanation. Messaging is when you're presenting like Ward Blatch did with Tech Update and so on. And many of you have seen me do that type of presentation, particularly at the IPBC conferences. And then we move to room layout. And this is a room layout for a small presentation of, let's say, 20 people. And by the way, this should not be here. I forgot to take it out. So no podium in the center of the table. And notice that I have the podium here. And notice an X there. I can count on the fingers of one hand when I presented from the right side of the room facing. And you're going to say, what's the difference? Well, the difference is this. You're sitting in the audience and you're looking at me, my mouth, and my eyes. And then I talk about something on the screen. So now your eyes move from here to here, and they go across the screen and down. And that's a logical way for it to go. Now, if the podium's here, now your eyes have to jump way across to there, then come back. And that's irritating. So from my perspective, that's a no-no. This is a no-no. Again, I can't recall the last time I presented with a podium. And why not? Well, tell me how you're going to fit your notebook, your notes, and a mouse pad on that type of podium. And secondly, you're hidden from the audience. And thirdly, you're using that static mic. So here's a tip that I started, I don't know how many years ago, and you're going to find that the screen is fuzzy here because it was part of a picture that was blown up. But you can see my ugly mug there. And can you see the white boxes? Those are milk crates with a tablecloth on. And what's so brilliant about that? Well, it's the exact height that allows you to stand and present and easily put your hands on your notebook. And if it's a longer presentation, then I'll have a bar stool behind my bum. I don't sit on it, I just rest on it. And that takes a lot of the pressure off. Let's look at 4 tools of the trade. Number 1, top right. You ought to have a clicker. In fact, I carried 2 because that gets you away from my milk crates or away from behind the podium. Number 2, for those of you who have presented with audiences of over 100, you're going to need some AV. And from my perspective, I've got to have a throat mic like that. I can't work with a handhold. I need both hands on the keyboard, or if I'm not on the keyboard, I need both hands to go with my presentation. If I'm doing a webinar, as I'm doing now, I'm going to use, and I am using, a high quality microphone headset. And then finally in the top left, absolutely, if you're doing webinar presentations, you need an editing tool, and I use Camtasia. So for example, there was a pause when Marilyn took over and ran the polling question. To you, that seems normal. But if that pause was there when you get the webinar recording, it's jarring. So there's the tools of the trade. And I'm going to focus for about 30 seconds on messaging with these slides. Now there's my good friend Jennifer Warrow from Sage, doing a presentation to an audience of probably 50. And notice, no podium. She's using a clicker. Or how about my friend Scott Zambergen doing a presentation to a room of 500. Notice the podium, but notice there's no notebook on the podium. With an audience this size, you've got an AV technician, and he's running the slides. And in this case, he's also running a TV. And you'll notice Scott's hands, there's his clicker. So let's move on to my 10 presentation tips. Number 1, write a script. So how do I do that? Well, I started this one about a week ago, and I opened Notepad and I wrote down some tips, some bullets. I refined them, got them in the proper order, and then I created the PowerPoint slide. So here's what my script looks like. Now, what I used to do here would be put these all in bullets, but you notice they're not bullets, and I'll show you how I do that in a moment. Next, one thing at a time. So for example, if I was presenting a set of financial statements, I would not have the balance sheet and the income statement on one slide. They'd be different. Number 3, no paragraphs. How often have you seen this? Answer, too often. Number 4, pay attention to design. Sans serif font, that's an Arial or a Calibra font. Usually dark text on a light background. And then styles. You'll notice that my style differs on each of the slides. And that's deliberate because I want to show you the possibilities. If this was a presentation to I'm going to say an audience, this would have the same style. Now, how do you get styles? Well, I have some good news for you. If you're on PowerPoint 2019, 2016, and Office 365, it's brilliant because it uses AI. And the other thing that I noticed in the polling question was a lot of you use images, and I commend you for that. So I need an example of using an image. So where do I go? Well, out of full screen here, and bear with me as I go here. And I'm in Google. So I'm working on the report for the survey that I'm working on. So I'd like an image of a survey. What do I do? Well, pretty basic. And here we go. Well, I don't like any of those, but more survey images. And I got a ton of them. So I pick one I like. Well, let's do this one. I right mouse click, copy image, go back to my PowerPoint, and do a paste. So I've taken that image and just pasted it in. And now in 2019, 16, and 365, if I go to design, I'll get 5, 6, or 7 design ideas. And I just pick the one I like. And so on. Think outside the screen. Don't present sitting down. Why? When you're standing up behind the milk crates or on a platform, you're looking down at the room and you create what I call presence. What you wear matters. Many of you know that I have 2 trademarks. Number 1, I always wear a salmon colored shirt. One time I had 12 of them, and that idea came from my good friend Hugo Croft-Levesque. Number 2, Nancy and I had some wonderful travels, and in all of my presentations, whether it was training or not, I would include a picture of where we were. Now this is fuzzy, but that's Ashford Castle in Ireland, and we had 2 wonderful nights there, and we had a hawk walk, and it was amazing to see them fly. Tip number 6, remember the rule of 24. And that applies to bullets. So what's the rule of 24? 4 bullets, 6 words. 6 bullets, 4 words. Now you can vary that, but what it does is limit the number of bullets and the number of text on the screen. Ask questions. I wish I could do that. And when I was presenting in Bums and Seats, I would do this at the start of a webinar, of a seminar. I'd go around the room as people came in with my seating plan, and I would introduce myself and write down the names. And then when I was asking questions for the first hour, I'd quickly glance down and say, Scott, what do you think about this? By the break in the morning, normally I would have all of these memorized. Does it work? And is it useful? Absolutely. It shows you care. Number 8, modulate. How many times have you heard presenters that go like this? I think this is the answer. This is the answer. You should do this and that. What do I mean by modulate? Get a little excitement in your voice. Modulate. You should modulate, modulate, and so on. Number 9, I will come back to at the very end. Use humor carefully, particularly in today's social media environment. And the last tip, of course, is that. So, how do you practice? Well, Nancy has heard me do a lot of practicing, but now I just record what I'm doing and play it back. Many of you are embedding tables, charts, financial statements into your webinars. I don't have time today to go into sounds and videos. That's another topic for another day. But let's look at including a financial statement. And I just happen to have one here, so let me call it up. There we go. Nothing magic about it. So I've got it highlighted. And I go copy. And I go back to my slide. And I don't do a paste. I do a paste special. Microsoft Excel worksheet object and paste link. There we go. Now, unfortunately, I can't do styles. They don't work. If I go here to to design, and I go click on design ideas, there aren't any. But what I will do is this. I'll size it properly for the screen. And then I like this, format background. I like a gradient fill, and I like blue, but that's personal. When it comes to tables and charts, I do it exactly the same way. So if we go back here and I go to embed a table, I just happen to have one here as well. So there's the results of one of the answers to my question at the moment. All I would do is this and do the same thing. Paste special, Microsoft. But I want to show you a cool tool that we have discovered in Windows 10 that I think will blow you away. Watch the screen change. You notice I've got a magnifying glass? Well, I can zoom the area in the screen, but if I want to see this with a mag glass, there we go. So how did I do it? I did the Windows key and a 1. And so on. Pretty cool. There it is. So I'll go over here and turn it off. Embedding a chart is done the same way. So let's talk about humor. As I said, do it very carefully. So see if you get a smile out of this. I'll give you a moment to read it. And by the way, I am often guilty of number 2 with my beloved wife, Nancy. Now that kind of humor for me is A+. As is this. Now I've got to go out of here and run a short video.
A I bought something from you last week, and I'm very disappointed.
Oh, yeah? What's the problem?
Yeah, well, my BlackBerry is not working.
What's the matter? Run out of juice?
No, it's completely frozen.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. I'll tell you what. Let's try it on orange.
That's got a few black spots, you see.
Oh, dear, yeah. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Was there anything I can do to get my BlackBerry working?
Well, it could be an application issue. But where do you store that BlackBerry?
Well, it's on my desktop.
Well, you could try using a mouse to drag the BlackBerry to the trash. Then after you've done that, you might want to launch the BlackBerry from the desktop.
Well, I've already tried that a few times. I mean, all it did was mess up Windows.
Well, it might be worth waiting a couple of weeks. They got the latest BlackBerries coming in then.
Well, could you give me a date?
Certainly.
Let me put that date in my diary.
Anything else I can help you with?
Yes, I've also got a problem, to be honest, with my Apple.
Oh dear, that is an old Apple, isn't it?
Yeah.
When did you buy that?
Last week.
Last week? Oh, they brought out 2 new Apples since then. What's the problem with it?
Well, I tried to put my dongle in it, and it won't fit.
Oh, yeah. And how big's your dongle?
Well, I don't know much about these things, but my wife's seen a few dongles in her time. And she says it's a little bit on the small side.
Well, I'm afraid there's not a lot I can do about that. Tell you what, let me try booting it. No, it's crashed. Anything else I can help you with?
Well, funnily enough, yes, my grandson's birthday soon, you
yeah.
see. Now, he's already got an Apple and a BlackBerry. I mean, have you got anything else that you might just like?
Well, we're doing a special offer on these. I mean, I can't make head or tail of them, but the kids seem to like them.
Okay.
Xbox. 360.
I'll usually add something of interest. And what's that? Typically, it's a look ahead, like this. Useful? You betcha. And continuing in the appliance area, how about an internet fridge with a 21-inch touchscreen display on the screen to leave notes and so on? And those are available today, by the way. They're a little pricey. And for the skiers in the audience, and one that I wish I had when I was doing 150 flights a year, was this alarm clock. Not the sensor wake one that uses smell and you can vary it to wake you, but the clocky one, this one here, jumps up 3 feet, runs around, you need to chase it to turn it off. And then picking on some of the men in the room, I suspect. How about that? And on that note, thanks for being a great audience. Marilyn, I'm done. Let's run the last poll.
Absolutely, Alan. I'm happy to do that. I'm going to run your second poll, folks. You should be seeing your screen turn blue now. Oh, I apologize. I've run. This is the Adagio poll. Hold on. Well, let's just jump into that, shall we? Let's do paperless now, and we'll follow up with the PowerPoint. This is about paperless activities in your office. A great lead in for Andrew. Have you taken steps to go paperless? Maybe no, maybe some reading, maybe you're establishing your filing system, Maybe you store everything electronically, but still keep paper, or maybe you're all the way there with everything being electronic. We're already at 90%, so I'll count you down on this poll, and then we'll get to Alan's. We're at 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I'm going to close the poll. And there are the results. I'm hoping that Andrew can see that. So that when we get to his session, it'll make some sense. So folks, I'm going to give you Alan's poll now. And it's about what you've just seen with PowerPoint. Going forward, will be you enhancing your PowerPoint presentations from what you've learned today. Maybe you'll use images. You're going to definitely present standing up, ask a lot of questions. The rule of 24, maybe none of the above. You can select all that apply to you. Pretty easy poll. Thanks for your responses. We're already at 80%, so I'll count you down from 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And remember, 4 out of 5 answers or more will get you your verified PD credit. So I'm closing the poll now, and I'm going to share those results with you, Alan.
Excellent. So let's bring in Andrew, Marilyn.
My pleasure. Good morning, Andrew. I'm just going to make you the presenter. You'll need to unmute yourself.
There we go. Well, it's a pleasure to virtually see everybody today. I think that last time we were talking together, I was sitting in Maui, but this time I'm not so pleasantly ensconced, but I kind of wish I was there, and I'm sure for those of you who are on the East Coast and in the central part of Canada, wish you were there too. And it's been fairly chilly and snowy over the last little while. I just wonder, Marilyn, whether you could put up the poll for the going paperless. I'm just kind of curious. I'd like to open with that and see those numbers again. Looking at those numbers, I think that many of us have moved towards at least mirroring whatever's going on in the filing system, and have had better still storing stuff away in a paper because we have comfort with paper. So I thought that today what I'd talk about is the approach that we've taken to paperless. The paperless started in for organizations that had a huge amount of paper, like governments and healthcare insurance providers and things like that. And they had a huge tidal wave of paper coming at them, and they wanted a way to manage all of that. And that's where paper management came from to a large extent. And then, of course, the accounting department realized that not only was it also having to deal with an appropriate flood of paper, but it was also generating a lot of paper. So I thought what I'd do here is talk a little bit about the approach that we've taken to managing all those accounting documents. We're just, for those of you who are not familiar with Adagio, with the Adagio brand, we've been shipping Adagio since 1999. It's multi-user, multi-currency, modular accounting system. So it has, if you just need general ledger and accounts payable because you're a small not-for-profit and that's really all you're managing is expenses against budget, you can just buy the GL and AP. If you're a wholesale distribution organization, you need more ERP than you get with QuickBooks or Sage 50, or better inventory management. We might be a logical next step for you. Our inventory has a 16-character item number in 4 user-defined segments with reporting by segment and analysis by segment, and 5 different costing methods: average, LIFO, FIFO, standard, and user-defined. Our purchase order solution allows multiple vendors on a single purchase order, which makes it very easy to manage landed costs. If you're importing goods, oh yes, we're fully multi-currency, so you can, in order to purchase some goods, you can have 3 different vendors on the purchase order: your main supplier, a shipper, and a customs broker. They can all be billing you in different currencies. When the goods are received, they land into your inventory at your home currency, because inventory is valued at home in all cases. And then as the invoices come in, if they don't exactly match what the purchase order was raised for, you can make adjustments on the fly, and your inventory valuation will be appropriately adjusted in the GL, or over the inventory that remains in your inventory if you haven't sold it yet. So let's see. And if you are not for profit, you can raise purchase orders for services. For instance, drug and alcohol counseling to a maximum of $15,000, and then work down the PO as the invoices come in. Job costing, 7 different revenue recognition methods that I can never remember off the top of my head. Because one of the things one of the pain points in the entry-level products is the fact that you have to deal with custom reporting. You have to deal with the reports that they provide to answer the quick questions that your customers and clients have. We've spent a goodly amount of time making sure that the reports in Adagio are easy to customize. We're designed for an organization managing somewhere between 2 million and 100 million in revenue. The general ledger costs in the neighborhood of $2,000. We don't want that to be a significant line expense item for the size of business that we target Adagio for. And you should understand that every accounting software vendor has a model client that they have written Adagio for. Ours is managing a certain volume of transactions, and also has an actual accounting department. So someone who has been hired because they know the difference between a debit and a credit. They don't need a picture of a check in order to write a check. They know what an adjusting journal entry is. They're comfortable with clearing accounts, all those real accounting things. Now I said or person. In being in this business and for well over 30 years, one of the things that has continued to amaze me is the systems that people survive with, even multiple linked Excel spreadsheets to manage their accounting. In this day and age, we still discover organizations that are doing that, even when there are quite functional free accounting solutions out there. And what I've realized in that time is that if it's just you doing the accounting, then you can actually make anything work. You can make it so if it's just you can make any system that an organization is using work, because you do the data entry and you do the reporting, and you know the way items must be coded and to get the reports that you need out the other end. So generally in Adagio, the sites that are running Adagio, over 2/3 of them have more than one person in the accounting department. They have a chief financial officer or controller, or someone with that title type of position who's working in the general ledger and may do the bank rec, or they have someone else doing the bank rec. They'll have an AP clerk, an AR clerk, or maybe 2 AR clerks. We of course don't count sales guys who are entering sales orders as being in the accounting department, but they usually have access to modules in the accounting for order management and inventory, looking up quantities in inventory. Let's see what else. No IT department. Adagio has a very, very light IT technology footprint. Once it's set up, it's pretty self-contained. The report, all the management reports are designed with Crystal reports. I know some of you may shudder at that, but Crystal reports is an enormously powerful tool, probably not designed for mere mortals, more for postdoctoral computer science candidates, really, in my experience. But it has the joy that the reporting is very flexible. So all of our management reports are done with Crystal reports and can therefore be edited for those of you brave enough to wade into Crystal reports itself. But we have a special spreadsheet tool for financial statement design, and another drag and drop designer, multi-section designer for designing checks and invoices and credit notes and order confirmations and RMAs and all those other forms that have to come out of the out of the accounting department, so that the people who are in the organization can add a season's greetings note to their invoices and statements in that they send out in December without having to learn anything about Crystal. It's technology that they can generally cope with. Our organizations are report driven. I talk now report driven. A lot of things are screen or electronic based, but what I mean by that is that they actually print the financial statements every month. They're managing their expenses against budget. They're looking at inventory levels and inventory movement. They're planning manufacturing against outstanding orders. They're managing credit and their customer accounts with statements and emails that are going out. So they actually make use of the reporting tools, overdue receivables, open payables, aged open payables. They look at those reports and those reports help them manage the business on an ongoing basis. We have a couple of things that are unique, and I'm going to talk. I'll just have talked about them in some of the other sessions that you'll find. I believe you'll find recorded on the K2 website. Everything is chosen off a grid in Adagio. We'll show you that as we show a little bit around the product, and I'm going to talk about Adagio Doc Store, which is the document management component that allows you to generate, file, and attach documents within the accounting system. Now, this is not revolutionary. People have been able to attach documents, PDFs, to QuickBooks transactions for many years, and we've been shipping DocStore now for slightly over a year. So it's not revolutionary, but it does. We do some things that I haven't seen in other document management solutions within the accounting space. We automatically generate PDFs of documents that come out of the accounting department. So if you send an invoice, we generate it to a client, we create a PDF, we file it away for you, and we attach that PDF automatically to the invoice transaction in accounts receivable or an order entry without you having to do anything special about without having to do anything. It just ends up in the filing cabinet for the customer. We file it away, and the filing cabinet has a structure that a mortal can figure out what's going on. So within the filing cabinet, and you can choose where this filing cabinet is placed on your network. It can be under the data of the company, or it can be on a completely separate external drive. We create, under this file folder, we have a separate folder for customers and for vendors and for general ledger transactions, just the way you would expect in an actual accounting office. There would be a filing cabinet for customers with all the information about customers, and within that filing cabinet there would be a folder for every individual customer, and these folders, which have the customer name and customer number as the folder name, these are automatically generated for you. You don't have to create them. Adagio will go and make a folder. So if you have a new customer and you generate an invoice for the customer, the Adagio will automatically create a folder, name folder for that customer, and then we'll create an invoice folder so that you can go and see all the invoices that have been generated for that customer, and you can see that the documents themselves are numbered. This is this particular one that's highlighted on your screen is for customer Able Cable 01, Able 01. The source of the invoice was from order entry. It's an invoice, that's the I, and it was invoice number 4001. So that if you bring up the preview pane, so that if you looked very closely at this, you would see that all of that information is being picked up off that invoice, and those are generated automatically. You don't have to do anything about this. Now, the fact that the file folder, the folders are separate from the accounting has that was very specifically taken as a decision, because QuickBooks, when you attach a document to a transaction, that document gets embedded in the accounting database, and you very quickly fill up the accounting database with document images. So we wanted the documents themselves to be stored separate from the accounting. And also the documents that are attached are not particularly volatile. Now, volatile means that they don't change very much. Once a generated image has been saved away, it doesn't change. And once you've backed it up once, you have it backed up, and you don't really have to worry about it very much after that. And then the final thing is you want to be able to move these around, because if the drive that you elected to store these on is filling up, or it begins to make an odd noise that is a bit disturbing, and you want to move all of these to a different drive letter or a different folder, or out from under the company onto a different drive, this storage, the way we are storing the documents, allows you to move those documents to another place without breaking any of the links within the accounting system itself. So the fact that we do all of this, this is all done automatically for all the documents that Adagio itself is responsible for. So if you create an order confirmation, that'll be attached to an order. If you print a check, that'll be a remittance advice will be attached to the check. If you create a purchase order, that will be attached to the purchase order transaction. But one of the things that's unique that we do comes from looking at our own accounting department, because virtually everybody in a paper-based accounting department spends an enormous amount of time attaching documents to each other. So when you receive goods, when you receive an invoice from a supplier, you put it on one side, and then when you print a check, you attach the invoices to the check that was printed. And you do that so that someone can see what invoices were paid with that check. And we completely automate that for the accounting department. So when you print a check in Adagio Payables, we automatically generate a remittance advice and attach that remittance advice to the check transaction. And then we attach images of all the invoices that were paid on that check to the remittance advice. So someone looking at the check image sees the remittance advice and then all the images of all the invoices that it paid. And those flow through, once a transaction has, or an image has been attached to a transaction, it will flow through the rest of the accounting. So what that means, excuse me, so what that means is if I'm in the general ledger, and I'll just show you this very briefly, I'll log into the general ledger. There's, of course, user security and all that stuff in Adagio, because as you get more and more people in the accounting, you need a security model. So what that means is that all of these transactions flow through the accounting. It means that if I'm in the financial reporter, so here's a financial statement. I'll just give it a second for it to propagate out through the Webiverse. This financial statement has two columns, a period to date and a year to date column. If I'm looking at this financial statement and I'm thinking, oh, that office expense number, that seems, I wonder what's in that. I can double click on that number and see all of the individual accounts and departments that were summed to get me to that 44,000 number on the financial statement. And then if I'm curious about a particular entry, I can double click on that and see what's being posted throughout the fiscal calendar for that account and department. And if I want to see one fiscal period specifically for that account department because the number looks odd, I can double click on that and I can see the 3 transactions that were posted and the vendors that they came from. And if I click on one of those transactions, I can see the balanced journal entry that transaction was part of. And you'll notice over here on the left-hand side, there's a view button. I can actually click on this view and see the invoice that was attached for that expense. Now, if I was in the bank account and I was looking at a credit to bank, which seemed unusually high, I could click on the credit to bank and I would see the remittance advice and all of the invoices that were paid on that check. Now, perhaps it was a system check run where I generated $150,000 worth of checks paying 35 different, it was a run of 35 different checks for $150,000 that were all a single GL entry for $150,000 credit to bank, because actually they were paid electronically, and that's the way I want the transactions to flow into the GL. Then the controller or chief financial officer looking at that $150,000 credit to bank can double click on that $150,000 and see every remittance advice for every check and every invoice that was attached in that check run. Now you'll notice this view is, I can move this around. Giving a webinar, it's a little difficult, but normally this viewer for the PDFs will be over on your second monitor, so that as you look at the other transactions, you can leaf through the transactions and see them. Now, there was a lot of drilling down in that. We went through the account department and then into the fiscal calendar and then into a particular period, and that might be a little tedious. What you might be interested in is show me all the transactions that got me to $44,000. And there you just right mouse click on the number and ask to see the transaction details. And here's all of the transactions that were posted across all accounts and all departments that get me to that $44,000 number on the financial statements. Because that's really, that's usually one of the challenges in a multi-person accounting department is you print out a set of financial statements, and just before you're about to hand them out, you're kind of looking at them and you say, wait a minute, that number cannot possibly be right. And now you have to figure out why the number cannot possibly be right on the financial statements. And there's a bunch of reasons it might not be right. Someone might have put a wages payable account in the middle of the telephone expenses because they're not very clear on the way the chart of account is organized. You may have, someone may have bought a new telephone system and expensed it rather than capitalized it. So that will require some adjustment. Someone may have just neglected to code something to a particular department. A big transaction has come through and it didn't end up in the GL account where you expected it to be, and you have to go hunting for it. So we have tools to help you find all of those transactions. But you may have noticed on the screens that I've been bringing up, there's a little button here that has an old Excel 2003 logo on it, because that's when the feature was first developed. But if you click on this button, the transactions that you're looking at will be sent to Excel. So all the grid that you're looking at will be sent to Excel. And we drop it into Excel. Here, I'll just let you watch it being dropped into Excel. And you'll notice that when we send it to Excel, we send it as a table. Now, if you are not familiar with the way tables work, run, don't walk to your keyboard and start signing up for Excel news, Excel webinars and Excel newsletters like those provided by K2, and start learning about this really powerful tool in Excel, because this allows you to filter. I want to see just the transactions for period 1, and so these are very useful, and we drop everything into Excel as a table. I'm sure many of you have had the experience of printing a report to Excel or sending a report to Excel and then spending 2 or 3 hours doing nothing but removing extraneous columns and rows and totals and all that stuff, tidying the data up in such a way that it's actually usable by a human to do some interesting analysis. So anywhere in Adagio that you see that little Excel button, we allow you to drop whatever grid you're staring at into Excel to do other analysis. Now, you might have noticed over here on the left-hand column, we still have the view button for the documents. So if I'm in Excel or I've sent this off to someone, I can click on the view button and see the documents that were associated with that transaction. So imagine the ease of use that represents for an auditor. Because if we go back to our data, I'll look at the data here. Here's a folder that was created when we sent that data to Excel, and there's the Excel spreadsheet that I just created, TX details 6675. And under here, these are all the documents that were pulled out of the filing cabinet that were referenced by that Excel spreadsheet so that they can be linked to and locally linked to without having any requirement to be within the accounting space. So you could take this Excel Direct folder and put it to a USB key and hand it to an auditor or an accountant or year-end numbers or whatever and say, not only is this all our transactions that you asked about, but also all the supporting underlying total documents that that are part of the transaction analysis that you requested. Okay, so I believe we have another poll just to make sure that you're still paying attention. I wonder if you could launch the second poll in the series, Marilyn.
Absolutely, my pleasure, Andrew. So folks, you should see a blue screen. Have you ever needed to see a source document when looking at a financial statement? Your choices are no, rarely, often, and perhaps this doesn't apply to you on today's webinar. Nice, easy 4-question poll. And remember, 4 out of 5 today. We have 5 questions, so 4 or 5 questions answered will earn you 1 verified PD credit. We're already at 90%, folks. Thanks for your quick responses. I'll be closing the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I'm going to close the poll and share those results.
Interestingly enough, I can't see the poll results. So
no. So the folks with no are 5%. The rarelies are 22%. The oftens are 67%, and we have 6% people on the call today that it's not applicable for them.
Yeah. So an interesting thing about that poll is that as you get more and more people in the accounting, and by the way, this could be in an accounting office. This does not have to be an accounting department in a business or not-for-profit organization. It could be if you are in public practice and you're doing write-up for many different organizations. Often the first indication that there's been a coding error is when you print the financial statements, and then you have to go back. We've all dealt with, I just have a quick question, and you need to go to the source documents. And if you have to start wading through the filing cabinet, that can be a major pain. So to the best of my knowledge, I think we've seen some very, very cool. Well, there are external systems such as Receipt Bank or HubDocs or other systems which are excellent if you're just a sole practitioner, like a media graphic artist or a fitness instructor or something like that, and where all of your vendors are uniquely tied to a single GL account. Like this is always a restaurant, this is always office supplies, this is so. Generally, for the size of organization that uses Adagio, invoices are coded across multiple different GL accounts. They're coded across different departments. They're coded across different jobs in job costing. Just looking at a specific invoice requires a human to actually do the coding appropriately for the organization. But if you store your documents in an external system, such as Receipt Bank or HubDocs, then you have the challenge of you have to go through the context switch, whereas within Adagio, the document storage is completely integrated within the accounting space. So the documents are always available. The documents auto flow through all of the various modules. Documents are auto attached together. So if we start at the very highest level, if someone generated a requisition, that would be attached to the purchase order it was raised on. And when the purchase order was received against, the PO and the requisition would be attached to the receipt document. And when the invoice comes in from the vendor, the requisition and the purchase order will be attached to the invoice image. And you can take invoices that came from vendors, you can scan them, you can drag and drop them from an Explorer window, you can drag and drop them from an email message into the batch entry. You can drag and drop a document before you start coding it to a particular vendor. And then when you write a check to pay that invoice, the remittance advice will be generated for you, and the check and the remittance advice will be generated for you. The invoice image will be attached to that remittance advice along with the receipt documents and the purchase order and the requisition. So someone staring at that expense will see the entire document trail without leaving the accounting. So in my last minute, I have one last poll. that I'd like Marilyn to put up. If you display that poll, it's a quick question and answer. I know that people do not sit up one day and say, geez, I need new accounting software, but we're quite excited by the functionality that this offers, and I'm kind of curious to know if you are managing a ton of paper, whether this is attractive enough to make you at least consider Adagio as an accounting platform if you're battling with quick order management in QuickBooks, or inventory management in Sage, or QuickBooks, one of the entry-level products, or you have an old software from the 90s, which no one else has heard of. So you can tell me what's on the poll results, Marilyn, and.
Yes, I'll be happy to do that. We're just at 85%, folks, so I'll be counting you down from 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, getting those last few votes in. Thanks very much for your responses. So we have 20% in the no column, 17% probably not, 16% perhaps. We're looking at document storage solutions now. 7% agree this would make their lives easier. And at this time in our call, 40% is not applicable for them today.
Well, it's been interesting chatting with you all. I know it's one of the exciting things about webinars is that I hope that if you have any questions from the material that you saw today, you won't hesitate to type the questions in as you exit. And we hope you have a great day today. Back to you, Marilyn.
Thanks as always, Andrew. Alan, I'm going to be making you the presenter now.
So for the wrap, 2 things. Number 1, Marilyn Benninger has been goofing off for the last week in the Dominican Republic. And that has caused us to not get the recording and stuff and your CPD certificates out for the January 10th one. She assures me that they will go out tomorrow, so no need to send the emails. And secondly, K2 runs a number of webinars that are paid webinars. For example, budgeting tools. For example, Office 365, new tools and new tricks. And if you're interested, you just go to www.k2e.ca. So on that note, thanks for attending. Don't forget to complete the short survey, and we'll see all of you, I hope, in 2 weeks. Marilyn, it's a wrap.